Hi, my name's Rachel Monroe. I'm 30, a wedding photographer from Wisconsin. And this is the story of how I ruined my relationship with my sister and mother right in front of 20 guests in a satin gown with a microphone in my hand. And no, I don't regret it. Because for the first time in my life, I chose me. I chose boundaries. I chose peace over obligation, over guilt, over playing the role of the bigger person just to be trampled on again. You ever had a moment that was supposed to be yours? A birthday, a graduation, a wedding, and someone else just couldn't help but make it about them. Then you'll understand why I did what I did. They say revenge is petty, but I say, sometimes, it's necessary. Before we get into the details, let me ask you this. Have you ever felt like the side character in your own life? Have you ever watched your own family prioritize someone else, even on the day that was supposed to be yours? If you have, you're not alone. Hit that like button if you've ever had to draw a hard boundary. Subscribe if you want more stories that hit deep. And buckle up, because this is more than just a ruined wedding. This is a liberation story dressed in white. To understand what happened, you need to understand the Monroe household. My mom, Karen, is a classic almond mom, high-functioning, image-conscious. Always had a story to tell at brunch, but never really knew her own daughters. And Jessica, my little sister, she's the golden child, always has been. When we were kids, I was the quiet one, the one with perfect grades. Zero drama. Who got overlooked because I didn't need saving. Jessica was chaotic, unpredictable, loud, and adored for it. When she got detention, she's just spirited. When I got a scholarship, well, of course she did. She's so responsible. As we got older, the gap grew. Jessica got her first job, part-time receptionist at a day spa. My mom threw her a career brunch. I got accepted into a competitive art program, and Mom forgot to show up for my gallery showing. But I swallowed it, again and again. Told myself to be understanding. Told myself she was just closer to Jessica, that being the older sister meant making room. I even photographed Jessica's wedding for free, in the rain, with a fever, because she said no one else could capture her angles. That's who I was, the helper, the quiet sister, the one who smiled and gave up space. Until I got engaged, when Ethan proposed. I genuinely thought things would be different. Maybe finally, I'd have a day, a moment. One day, not about Jessica. Nope. From the second I announced the date, Jessica began inserting herself. You should totally do sunflowers. They're just so happy. Ooh, can I do a little toast? Like something fun and emotional. At first I thought, whatever. She's always been this way. Let it slide. Tara, my best friend and maid of honor, gave me that knowing look every time Jessica suggested another idea. But then came the moment, the shift. 3 weeks before the wedding, we're sitting at my final dress fitting. Jessica, Mom, Tara, me. That's when Jessica said it. So, since everyone will already be there, I was thinking maybe I could announce the pregnancy at the reception. Just like that, soft voice, hand on her belly, dramatic pause. Tara choked on her iced tea. I went numb. My mom immediately lit up. Oh, honey, that's perfect. You'll be glowing by then. They looked at me like I was supposed to be grateful that she'd picked my wedding for her baby announcement backdrop. I looked Jessica dead in the eye and said, no, this is not a joint event. This is my wedding. If you say anything about your pregnancy, I will walk away from both of you. Mom rolled her eyes. Rachel, don't be so dramatic. Jessica smiled, condescending. You're not really going to disown us over a baby, are you? I didn't answer. I just sent them both a formal email that night. Clear, direct, no baby announcements, no surprises, no drama, or they'd be out of my life. I CC'd Tara and Ethan, just so there were no misunderstandings. The morning of my wedding was surreal. It felt like I was walking toward a battlefield dressed in silk. The sky was perfect. The playlist was soft acoustic guitar. Ethan looked calm and strong, like a man who'd fight dragons for me. I was ready, nervous, but ready. Tara kept Jessica busy, Lisa, a friend of both sides, but with loyalty to me, kept her camera rolling quietly, just in case. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Ethan cried during his vows. I remember thinking, maybe they heard me. Maybe this really can be about us. I was wrong. At the reception, 20 guests sat in a cozy circle under fairy lights. Tara started passing out wine. I saw my mom whisper something to Jessica. Then Jessica stood up. She picked up her glass, clinked it with a spoon. The room stilled. I froze. Jessica said, "Before the meal, I just wanted to share something joyful." And that's when my mother, my own mother, pulled out a gift bag from under her chair and said, "The new mommy also deserves some recognition." I stood up. My chest was pounding, but my hands were steady. For the first time in years, I wasn't shaking anymore. I walked to the microphone. I walked straight up to the mic stand. My dress swept across the wooden floor. You could hear the forks clink down. The music cut. 20 faces turned to me, some confused, some concerned. Jessica froze mid-smile, holding her glass like a trophy she hadn't earned. My mother clutched the baby gift as if it were some holy offering, her mouth half open like she was still waiting for applause. I looked at them both. Then I spoke. Calmly. Clearly. No stammer. No apology. "This is not a baby shower," I said. "This is not a gender reveal. This is not a family announcement, or a group therapy session, or a game of emotional chicken. This is my wedding. And if you still thought, after all I said, that this moment was yours to take, then I'm here to tell you publicly you were wrong." My voice didn't crack, not once. I looked directly at my mother, then at Jessica. You both made a choice. You were told exactly what crossing this line would mean. And now I'm making mine. I don't care who's pregnant. I care who respects me. So you're done. You're both done. Get your things. Leave. The silence was absolute. You could have heard a petal fall. My mother stood there frozen for a second, as if unsure whether to argue or fake a fainting spell. Jessica blinked, like she hadn't computed that her main character moment had just been stolen out from under her. Then the tears started, not sobs, not grief, but those infuriating, manipulative, "I've been wrong" tears she weaponized since age 6. "Rachel," she said. "I didn't mean to." "Yes, you did," I interrupted. "And you can cry all you want, but you don't get to weaponize guilt here. Not today." Paul, her husband, stood up beside her. His voice was quiet but firm. "I told you not to do this," he said to Jessica, and that one sentence that cracked the entire illusion. Jessica's face twisted in betrayal. My mother gasped. Paul simply took her hand, not in affection, but in ushering her toward the door. For once, he chose to protect peace instead of enabling spectacle. They walked out together, followed grudgingly by my mother, and as the doors shut behind them, the silence broke. A ripple of breath, then soft applause. Not the clapping for drama kind. The kind people give when someone does what no one else had the courage to do. The air shifted. Tara rushed up and squeezed my arm. Lisa gave me a subtle thumbs up from behind her camera. Even Ethan, who'd stayed quiet during the whole thing out of respect, walked over, took my hand, and whispered, "You handled that like a queen." I wanted to collapse, to scream, to cry. But instead, I smiled. For the first time all day, I smiled without restraint, because even though the moment had been hijacked, I had taken it back, but I wasn't finished. Not even close. See? What Jessica and my mother didn't know was that I had already prepared for this. The second Jessica floated the "maybe I'll say something joyful" idea at my dress fitting, I didn't just issue a warning, I started planning. I gave Lisa permission to record everything. She was a mutual friend. Sure, but loyalty matters. She understood what this meant. She knew the stakes. We discussed camera angles. Audio. We had a code phrase in case anything happened. I had a backup mic checked and charged. I even warned the venue coordinator that certain guests might need to be escorted out politely, if needed. You think that's excessive? Try living your whole life getting steamrolled by people who cry louder than you speak. I wasn't just hoping they wouldn't cross the line. I was counting on it. Because some lessons don't land unless they're public. That same night, after Ethan and I danced under string lights and toasted with close friends, Lisa pulled me aside. "Do you want to see the footage?" she asked. "Absolutely," I said. We watched it in the bridal suite, me still in my dress, barefoot now, mascara slightly smeared. The footage was crisp. My voice, unwavering. Jessica's face when I cut her off mid-speech, devastating. My mom's frozen smile crumbling in real-time, cathartic. I gave Lisa the green light to post. She uploaded a short 45-second clip to TikTok the next day, titled "Bride Shuts Down Sister's Baby Hijack at Her Own Wedding." Faces were blurred, except mine. The internet didn't need to know who they were, but they needed to know this happened. I went on with my honeymoon. We didn't check our phones for 3 days. When we finally did, I nearly dropped mine in the ocean. The video had gone viral. 3.7 million views, 28,000 comments, 400,000 likes. Messages from strangers, "You're my hero. I wish I could have done this to my sister. You handled that like a boss. Can we talk about how well she set her boundary and executed it?" Even therapists weighed in. TikTok therapists, Reddit threads, YouTube reactions. Some even speculated this had to be staged because no one is this composed under pressure. Trust me when you've spent your life being quiet. The explosion is always clean. Because you rehearse it in your head for years. Jessica called me, emailed me, texted me from burner numbers. Take it down. You're humiliating me. You ruined my pregnancy announcement. Mom is devastated. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because the world had seen what I'd lived for years, a woman used to attention, melting down when she didn't get to steal it. My mother sent me a physical letter, not an email, a handwritten letter in cursive. She talked about how motherhood was sacred, how family meant forgiveness, how this video is causing irreparable harm. She ended it with, "You should have handled this privately." I wrote 2 words in Sharpie across the bottom and mailed it back, "You didn't." But this wasn't just about viral vindication. That wasn't the true revenge. The real consequence was what happened in the weeks after. Because when a spotlight hits dysfunction, people scatter. Jessica's baby shower. 2 months later, barely anyone came. Half the family had watched the clip. Even those who hadn't said much before. Now they knew. They saw the pattern, the manipulation, the enabling. And they quietly chose sides. Some stopped returning calls. Others declined invites. Paul, I heard from a cousin that he told someone. Honestly, I felt relieved. Finally, someone said it out loud. I didn't need to ask who he meant. For the first time in forever. I wasn't the one cleaning up the mess. I wasn't the one trying to smooth things over. I was the one who lit the match and let the fire speak for itself. And yet, the most powerful moment wasn't the video, wasn't the applause, wasn't the exile. It came one quiet morning, 2 weeks after the wedding. I was in my studio editing client photos. I looked at a shot of myself, standing alone at the reception mic, silhouetted against the golden lights, my back straight, chin high, eyes clear. And I realized this wasn't just the day I got married. It was the day I buried the person they expected me to keep being. But as liberating as that was, there was still one final piece of this reckoning left to fall into place. I won't lie to you and say it didn't hurt. Cutting off your own mother, that doesn't come with streamers or instant relief. It comes in waves. Silent breakfasts where you instinctively check your phone for a good morning text that never comes. Driving past the florist she used to drag us into every Saturday. Wondering if she still buys Jessica tulips in bulk just because there's this myth that going no contact is like deleting a toxic app, one click and gone. But it's more like amputating a limb. You stop the infection, yes, but phantom pain, that lingers. Still, every time doubt crept in, I went back to the video, not to relive the moment, but to remind myself that truth has a sound, a tone. And it was in my voice when I said, "You are dismissed." I didn't scream. I didn't sob. I stated it. Calm, clean, final. And that version of me, she's the one I protect now. Not the old Rachel who swallowed apologies that weren't hers to say. But that didn't stop others from trying to guilt me back into silence. My cousin Lindsay texted, "They didn't mean to hurt you like that. Rach. They were just excited. Excited. They hijacked my wedding. That's not excitement. That's entitlement dressed in pastel." Another aunt messaged, "Family is messy, but blood is thicker." I didn't reply, but I thought about it for days. About how people use the word family like it's a trapdoor you're not allowed to step off. No matter how badly the floor burns your feet. I realized something: people don't get mad when you set boundaries. They get mad when the manipulation stops working. And in my case, it had stopped cold. Still, not all the responses were bitter. Some were silent in a different way. Paul, Jessica's husband, sent me a message I didn't expect. Short, sincere. "You were right to say no. I'm sorry I didn't speak sooner. I think you saved her from herself." That message hit me harder than anything, because for the first time, someone in Jessica's orbit admitted what I had known all along: she wasn't oblivious. She wasn't just excitable. She was strategic. And I wasn't crazy for seeing it. A few weeks after that, Lisa texted me, "Random question. Would you ever want to tell this story in a podcast?" A Women's Boundaries series reached out after the video took off. I hesitated. I didn't want to become a brand. I didn't want this to be my thing. But I also knew stories like mine don't get told unless people like me tell them. So I said yes. We recorded a 40-minute interview, just voice. No names. Anonymized locations. It went live on a Monday. By Wednesday, the podcast episode had 90,000 plays. Dozens of women wrote in, "This happened to me too. You gave me language I didn't know I needed." I finally told my mother she doesn't get to insult me and still expect visits. And that's when I realized this wasn't just my story anymore. It was a crack in a larger wall, a space where hundreds of women had been taught to be gracious while being erased. And in that space, a quiet kind of power began to grow. Not vengeful, not performative, just steady, unapologetic, still. Power doesn't erase pain. And the next wave of it hit me on an idle Tuesday morning when I opened Facebook to see a photo of my mother and Jessica. A soft focus shot at a garden cafe. Captioned, "Brunch with my favorite girl. So grateful for the ones who truly matter." That stung. Not because I wanted to be in the photo, but because it confirmed what I had always known. And never said aloud, I was never the favorite. I was the function. The fixer. The useful first daughter who could be counted on to fold chairs and say sorry first. But love. The unconditional kind I had mistaken tolerance for affection. And that morning, I let myself cry. Not out of regret, but grief. Grief for the mother I had tried to earn for 30 years. Grief for the childhood I had narrated as normal. And grief for every time I thought being quieter, smaller, easier would make me visible. It never did. And yet, I was beginning to see that visibility doesn't come from shrinking. It comes from standing. And now, I stood taller in rooms where people used to talk over me. I took up space. I started saying no without apology. I stopped over-explaining. My photography business began to shift too. Not in profit, but in tone. I started attracting clients who wanted honesty, not perfection. Who liked how I captured quiet moments the way hands touch, the way someone looks when they don't know they're being watched. One bride told me, "You shoot like someone who's seen truth cost something." She wasn't wrong. But deep down, part of me still wondered, could things ever be repaired? Was reconciliation possible? If they ever truly took accountability, I asked Ethan once, late at night, while we were folding laundry, what if someday she actually apologizes? He looked up and said, "Then she can apologize. But that doesn't mean you owe her space again." That stuck with me. That boundaries weren't punishment. They were protection. And forgiveness didn't have to mean re-entry. Still, something lingered. An unfinished thread. Not with Jessica, not with Mom, but with me, the version of Rachel that still sometimes whispered, "Maybe you overreacted." I had to confront that voice. So I wrote myself a letter. Not for social media, not to perform. Just a letter from the Rachel who stood at the mic to the Rachel who once stayed silent to keep peace. It started with, "You were never wrong to want to be seen." And it ended with, "She may have given you life, but you gave yourself dignity. Keep choosing that." I tucked it into my journal. And that night, I slept for 9 hours straight. But closure isn't a switch. It's a slow, often ugly unraveling followed by a rebuilding so subtle, you only notice it in hindsight. And in the middle of that slow climb, one final twist was still waiting to test everything I had rebuilt. The message came on a quiet Sunday afternoon, nearly 5 months after the wedding. I was sitting on the porch, barefoot with a cup of lemon tea, editing a maternity shoot from a new client, ironically. Someone who had told me, "I want to celebrate my pregnancy without stealing attention from anyone else." A ping echoed from my phone. Unknown number. The preview read, "Hi Rachel. It's Mom. I hope you'll read this." I stared at it for a full minute before opening. The message was long, thoughtful, polished. The kind of message someone rewrites 6 or 7 times before hitting send. She said she'd been thinking a lot. That watching the family splinter after the wedding had been painful but illuminating. That she'd watched the video more than once and admitted, "You were clearer than I expected. And braver than I ever taught you to be." There it was. Not an apology. Exactly. But not a deflection either. She went on to say that Jessica had been struggling emotionally, that maybe she'd unintentionally learned her behavior from years of seeing me be the one to bend first. That maybe my silence now was forcing everyone to sit with what they've ignored. And finally, she said, "I understand if you can't forgive me. I just didn't want the last words between us to be the ones you said at the mic." I didn't reply right away. I read it twice, then 3 times. It was a good message. Not perfect, not all-encompassing, but real. And yet something in me hesitated, because for so long, all I'd wanted was an acknowledgement. A moment where she'd say, "I see you. I failed you. I hurt you." And now, when it finally came, I felt tired, not angry, not vindicated, just tired. Like someone who had already swum across the ocean and now, when they offered me a rescue boat, I wasn't sure I wanted it. Not because I hated them, but because I'd learned to stand on a new kind of shore. I showed Ethan the message. He didn't say much. Just read it quietly and handed me back the phone. "Whatever you decide," he said. "Just don't shrink." Not even a little. That night, I drafted a reply, deleted it, drafted another, deleted that too. because I wasn't sure yet if I wanted to re-engage or if I just needed to know she knew. And then, a week later, Jessica wrote me. Her tone was different, defensive, shorter. She said she didn't think what she did was that big of a deal, that family forgives, and I was being cold, that I had blown things out of proportion and punished everyone just to make a point. And, finally, you've made your statement. Can we just go back to normal now? That was the moment I knew. Nothing had changed. At least, not with her. She didn't get it. Still saw me as dramatic. Still saw herself as misunderstood. Still used phrases like go back to normal as if normal was ever something I agreed to. And in that moment, I felt a strange kind of peace because I no longer needed her to change. I didn't need her to understand. I had already released myself from the contract of being her mirror, her sponge, her audience. I didn't reply. I archived the message, blocked the number again, this time, without hesitation. But my mother, she was different. I could feel it over the following weeks. She sent 2 more messages. No pressure, just quiet updates. Saw this flower and thought of the walks we used to take. Tried making your old lasagna recipe today. It was a disaster. I didn't reply to those either, but I didn't block her. Not because I was ready to reopen the door, but because something in her tone had shifted. There was no tugging, no emotional bait, just small, respectful drops of memory. Like someone trying not to beg, but to reach. And I realized this is what real remorse looks like. Not tears, not dramatics, just presence. Without demand. One evening, after another long workday, I sat on the floor of my studio with a glass of wine and pulled out that letter I'd written to myself. The one that said, "She may have given you life, but you gave yourself dignity." I reread it slowly, felt the pulse behind every line, and then I grabbed a pen, flipped the page, and wrote, "It's okay to forgive, even if you don't let them come back inside." And just like that, something unknotted in my chest. Because forgiveness, I realized, isn't always a door. Sometimes it's just a window cracked open enough to let the pain out and the air in. A few days later, I sent my mother a message. Not a long one, just "I read your note. I'm not ready to talk yet, but I hear you. Thank you." She replied almost instantly, "Take all the time you need. I'll be here. No guilt, no follow-up, just space." And space was the one thing she had never known how to give. That message, simple, gentle, did more than any grand gesture ever could. It told me she was learning, and in some small way. It gave me permission to keep healing, even without resolution. But healing, I was learning, wasn't linear. Some days I woke up filled with gratitude. Others, I scrolled past old photos and felt the sting all over again. Milestones still ached. The first holiday without family brunch. The baby being born and hearing about it secondhand. The realization that I'd never meet my niece, at least. Not for now. These were losses. Real ones. But they were no longer bleeding. Just scars. Quiet. Visible only in certain light. Proof of a battle I'd survived by finally choosing myself. And as spring crept in, I found myself laughing more, singing while editing photos, holding Ethan's hand tighter, letting my friendships grow deeper, richer. Without the shadows of constantly performing emotional triage, I realized I wasn't bitter. I was awake. And sometimes, that was enough. Still, one unexpected encounter was waiting around the corner, a moment I couldn't predict. One final twist that would test everything I'd come to believe about forgiveness, pride, and the cost of peace. It was a Thursday afternoon, overcast and quiet. The kind of day where the light falls soft and everything feels one step removed from reality. I had just finished editing a shoot, a mother cradling her newborn under oak trees, when the knock came. It was gentle, hesitant. Not the assertive kind that demands attention. Just a soft, polite tap against the studio door. I assumed it was a client who got the time wrong. I opened the door and froze. It was her, my mother, standing there in a slate gray coat, her hair up, holding nothing in her hands. No flowers, no guilt gifts, no just thought I'd drop by with cookies. Just her, smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was taller now. She didn't say anything right away. Neither did I. We just stood there, suspended in the kind of silence that carries years between its folds. Finally, she spoke. I was nearby. I wasn't sure if I should come. I sat in the car for 20 minutes. Her voice wasn't shaky, just cautious, measured. I nodded once. You want to come in? She shook her head. Only if you want me to. I thought about that. Really thought. Then I stepped aside. And she walked in. We didn't sit. We didn't hug. We stood, facing each other among walls lined with portraits of people I didn't know a year ago but who, in their vulnerability, had shown me more honesty than my own family ever had. She looked around the space, not as a critic, but as someone trying to absorb a version of me she hadn't known existed. It's beautiful, she said. This is you, isn't it? I said nothing, but my silence answered for me. She took a breath. I didn't come to make a speech. I'm not here to defend anything. I just wanted to see you, that's all. I could feel my chest tightening. The kind of old defensive reflex that once made me jump to prove, to fix, to comfort. But I didn't speak yet. I waited. She continued. I've done a lot of thinking. More than you probably believe. I replayed everything I said, everything I didn't say. And I realize now, I taught Jessica how to take up space. But I never taught you that you were allowed to. That hit like a crack through glass. Because it was true. She hadn't come to fix it. She'd come to name it. And that mattered. I didn't cry. But something in my shoulders softened. She went on, slowly, cautiously. You were always the one I relied on. The one I didn't worry about. You were so capable. I forgot to see if you were okay. I thought I was giving you freedom. But what I gave you was distance. She paused. Then that wasn't fair. The silence after that stretched long. Not uncomfortable, just real. I let it sit before I answered. I needed you to say that. For a long time. And I don't know what to do with it now. She nodded. You don't have to do anything. I'm not asking for a reset. I'm just here. If you ever want to build something different, and there it was, not a plea for the old, but an offering for the new, one that respected the cost of entry. We stood like that for another minute. Then I said, you can sit, if you want. She smiled softly. Maybe next time. I walked her to the door. As she stepped outside, she turned back and added, I'll keep sending the little messages. You don't have to answer. Just know they're sent with love. I nodded. Okay. And she left. No tears, no theatrics. Just a quiet departure that felt like both an ending and a beginning. That night, I lay next to Ethan in bed, staring at the ceiling. She came. I said, He didn't look surprised. How do you feel? He asked. I took a long breath, like something finished. But not everything. Like I'm standing in a cleared-out room, and I get to choose what furniture comes back in. And that was the truth. I wasn't rushing toward reconciliation. I wasn't handing out absolution like candy. But for the first time, I felt like the architect of my own space. No more shrinking. No more negotiating basic respect. Just clarity. Weeks passed. The messages came every so often. A photo of a pie she burned. A blurry shot of a cardinal outside her window. A quote she saw in a bookstore. She didn't ask for anything in return. And slowly, I found myself smiling when I read them. Not ready to call, not ready to meet, but no longer angry. That was enough. Jessica didn't message again. I'd heard through Paul that things at home were complicated. He had started therapy, alone. Said he didn't want to raise a child in a house where gaslighting was a love language. I wished him well, quietly. Some stories weren't mine to fix. The next wedding I shot was a backyard ceremony. Just 25 guests. No centerpieces, no choreographed dances, just laughter, soft vows, and a bride who cried while reading her own words. I caught a photo of her wiping a tear with one hand and gripping her partner's fingers with the other. Pure emotion. Unfiltered joy. That photo went on my studio wall. I titled it Undivided, because that's what love should be. Not performative, not competitive, not conditional, just honest, steady, whole. Months later, on the 1-year anniversary of my wedding, Ethan and I drove out to the same venue, not for a party, just to stand under the same tree, hold hands, and breathe. Still glad we did it, he asked. I laughed. Still glad I threw them out. Or still glad I married you both, he said. I looked at him. Yes, to both. 1,000 times. Yes, because even though that day didn't unfold the way I imagined, it gave me everything I never knew I needed. It gave me my voice, my peace, my power. And now, looking back, I don't regret a second of it. Not the confrontation, not the silence, not the goodbye. Because sometimes, in losing the people you thought you couldn't live without, you find the person you were meant to become.